Hey y'all, Daniel Powell Machine-Powell cams. We had an interesting cam come in, I don't know, a couple of months ago, and it's something. I mean, sometimes we get some kind of oddball stuff, but I had never seen one of these exactly before, and it's got some history, so I thought it would be real interesting. So we're gonna do a little video on it. So hang loose, and we'll get into it. All right, so a customer obviously sent it in. It was a used cam. The story goes, so it's for a 1949 303 Oldsmobile. So I actually had to look that up because I had never, seen one. So apparently it went from, God, I don't remember the year range, but I want to say it was like 48 to 54 or something like that. I'm not sure. Somebody correct me in the comments. Um, So this camshaft, and it's a roller cam, stuff old like that. You don't see roller cams very often. All that stuff was, it had to be made. I mean, none of that stuff was available, right? So, I mean, I don't even know where they got roller lifters for, for back in that time period, but obviously they did, and it was a non-adjustable valve train. So, it was all of that's pretty neat to me, right? That they got all that to work. So supposedly this thing was ground. I'm assuming the whole cam was made by, or maybe the company, had somebody making cores. I don't know the history on that, but supposedly the cam was manufactured by Chet Herbert in 1954. So somewhere along in the era is the way the story goes. In the mid '90s, when he sent it, he sent in some paperwork that he had with it. And in the mid '90s, I believe, or early 2000s, the cam was sent to comp to have it profiled. I'm assuming to see what it was, and so they the customer provided that report when he sent the cam in. So when I checked it, we essentially got the same numbers, obviously. So it was really small. It was like like 214 or 215. It was a straight pattern cam, really low lift, like 260 or 270 at the low. Maybe it was 285. I don't remember. It was really low lift with a 1.5 rocker, and the customer had a 1.8 rocker on it with the really low lift. And then we reground it to a larger profile and put some more lift in it. So he's going to go back to a 1.5. Um, but what was interesting about it, and I'll show you in the Cam Doctor. But what was interesting about it, I thought, is a couple of features. So obviously these lobes were, essentially designed way back in the day, right? At some form, whoever, if Chet done it or Chet had somebody do it, or they copied somebody else's design. Regardless of that, how the design was done is interesting. Like how the numbers lay out, and the I'm almost positive when you see it, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But in the acceleration curve, it's really choppy. So I'm sure that the master was made with probably a manual mill and a rotary table, or a surface grinder and a rotary table. I'm assuming, right? Um, and I probably need to set that up and show you how that was done, because it's pretty complicated and super time consuming. So you basically have, if you don't know what a rotary table is, or an indexer, you need to Google it. That's the simplest thing to do, I guess. But essentially, you have this rotary table with a gearbox that can graduate into 1 degree increments. And so they just put a round index plate on there, and they can rotate it 360 degrees and move the mill cutter up or down, whichever way you're going, as you rotate to duplicate the lift table of the design. And so that leaves you with 360 facets like a diamond. You'll have little facets, 360 of them all the way around. As time went on, even doing it manual, they started doing them in a surface grinder, and instead of dividing it 360 degrees, they would divide it 720 degrees. So it was much more accurate, and the facets were much smaller. So then when it was all done, you had to hand file or use a diamond or a stone and stone the masters to get the facets out of it, to flatten it and smooth it. And I'm sure some did a better job at that than others, and I'm going to show you here. We're going let me go ahead and start the screen recorder and get this pulled up. All right, so here, I'm going to they're the same load, so I'm going to turn one off, and then the one I got on, I'm going to just bring it to 0, so it's center of the screen. So I don't know, that blue line, you can't see it. This is 0 here. And you can see how asymmetrical that lobe is. So the closing side, and it's even easier to see. So this is the acceleration curve. And you see how lumpy and bumpy that is. And even the velocity is kind of lumpy and bumpy. But having said that, on the opening side, it's kind of normal as far as how much velocity, the acceleration and all of that jazz. But all of this lumpy and bumpy is different, right? And then the closing side, normally it's not, lumpy like that. You don't see that. It'll just be some kind of curve, right? But how low it is what's odd. If you look at the height of the acceleration on the opening side versus the closing side, it's just super slow. And then they drug this thing out, and I don't know how many degrees. Let's see here. Man, I should have plotted it out, but it's it's probably, just looking, it's probably 10 degrees more on the exhaust side than the opening side. So they got it really drug out there. But all of these little bumps is probably from manufacturing the master manually with a rotary table. And I just haven't ever seen one like that. And I thought that was really interesting. And I also hadn't seen one with this much asymmetry. Because even with junky valve springs back then, there would have been no reason to have it this slow. It's just one of them. Either they didn't know, or this is just something they copied from somebody else that didn't know, or it was for some, I can't even think of an application that this would be for, especially with a load that small, because this thing is only, let's see, it's only 212, 213 at 50. So, it is what it is. But I just thought that was really neat to how, you just think about, to me, I'm nostalgic anyway, but you think about what they had to do back then versus what we can do today. And they made that stuff all by hand. They made their cam grinders by hand. Not everybody, but um, so many. Ed Winfield was probably the most well-known early cam grinder, and a lot of people kind of got their start with Ed Winfield. Ed Iskandarian got his start with Ed Winfield, and Ed Winfield just took a surface grinder and homemade a rocker table to go on it, and homemade his own little indexing system, and but again, it was kind of simple because they were doing four cylinders. So the indexing was just 45 degrees or 90 degrees. And then if you went to a six cylinder, it's just 30 degrees or 60 degrees. And not all V8s, but a lot of V8s are 45-degree bank angles. And this Oldsmobile that we're speaking of is a 45-degree bank angle. But the later Oldsmobiles are not 45 degrees. I think one's 39 and then one's 45. So, and then like a small block Chevrolets from 1 to 2 is 37 degrees. And then, so there's all kind of weirdo bank angles, but the normal stuff, four cylinders and six cylinders and some V8s are just nice even numbers, and it's super easy to be able to index from load to load. It's not a lot of math involved. And then, but just again, and flat tappet stuff, rollers is a lot more complicated. Flat tappet stuff, you can make a master, 3 inches bigger round or 8 inches bigger round. It doesn't matter. It still produces the same profile. But with a roller, it's not 1-to-1 because of the way the roller wheel attacks it, and then the way the follow wheel on the grinder hits the master. All of that stuff has to play in. So how they figured all of that out, it's crazy to me that they was able to pull all that off. And possibly, they didn't have it all figured out, and they would make a profile and then grind it and then check it with a degree wheel and be like, hey, that didn't do what we wanted it to do, and then they would adjust to make it do what they wanted to do. So, I don't know. I never got to talk to any of them people. I tried one guy that was with Ed early on. I tried to talk to him, but I never could really get much out of it. And most of these people's a lot older now, and they just, their memory ain't what it used to be. But I've had a couple of guys that worked early on in some of the cam stuff, and they told me about grinding masters and the surface grinder with 720 divisions and that kind of stuff. But I couldn't imagine, even today, I couldn't imagine trying to do that kind of stuff. That's but even and some people do, and I don't know. I mean, there ain't many people doing it that way anymore. But just like the CNC mill behind me, matter of fact, we did some that way early on, and it works fine. But you can turn the lift table into polar coordinates and CNC mill a master plate, and it works. I mean, it's not as accurate as $1 million grinder, obviously, but it works, and this is way more accurate than anything they done prior to, I don't know, probably the mid '80s, probably. So you can just take that with a grain of salt. But I'll put some pictures up here. This is a picture of the cam and the grinder. Man, I didn't get any good before pictures before we touched it at all. But these have, and I'll point them out, these have oil holes to oil the top end. And I guess maybe the later ones do too. I can't remember. I don't do a lot of those cams. But like the Chryslers are like that. They have oil holes, and the Pontiacs also have oil holes. And the customer wanted the journals 2 and 4 had the oil holes. He wanted them fully grooved. So we just machined grooves all the way around, like a FE4s like that is fully grooved. And there's some other stuff just fully grooved. but a lot of times we get requests to have those oiling journals fully grooved. So we'll put them in a lathe and groove them. So that's what we did on this one. We fully grooved it for the customer so it would oil the top end all the time instead of because the cam's half speed, so it's only oiling it every quarter turn or something of the crank because of the way the oil holes lay out. I think they're 90 degrees apart. And so it's got to come around, get oil into one and squirt it out the other. So the groove helps it oil the top end all the time. So anyway, so I love this old stuff like that. I probably was born 50 or 60 years too early. The 50s and 60s and the innovations that happened in that time was just amazing to me. So any of that history like that, I just eat it up. So I just wanted to share that with you because, back in the day, Chet Herbert he was a real name in cam grinding. Today, Herbert cams probably ain't so much, but back then he was actually doing stuff, right? Real stuff, He was in with the Potvin cams and Schneiders and on and on. The old cam grinders that had home, Ed Iskandarian that had homemade grinders, because you couldn't buy. I don't remember now when the Storm Vulcan come out. I want to say the Van Norman was first because they stopped production of the Van Norman in 54, I believe it was. That was the last one. And then on into I don't know when Storm Vulcan started, but I know was it Harvey or Ed? Harvey bought new Storm Vulcans, bought a Storm Vulcan to start with his business. So that's what he started with, and then, on and on. I don't remember. Ed Iskandarian, he just took a surface grinder and converted it, made his own. He copied Ed Winfield's rocker table. Ed showed him how to make the rocker table. And then so Ed made his out of a surface grinder like Ed Winfield did. And so that was how he was doing it to start with. And then Harvey had his own real store-bought grinder to start with. So, again, all that kind of stuff's neat too. But, we talk about quality and accuracy all the time. And I'm telling you, man, I don't care what nobody says. If you know how to use it, these old manual grinders, if they're in good shape, they will do as good a job as anything today. I see it all the time. So, anyway, I hope you found that interesting. And like I say, we'll put some pictures of the cam up here as we processed it and finished it and all that stuff. But it was a neat little project. I enjoyed it. And like I say, we was able to give it like 15 or 16 more degrees of duration and like 30 or 40 thousandths more lift to get him where he wanted to be. And, there's just, if somebody needed a cam for that, it would have to be made from scratch because nobody on the planet makes a core for that engine, And again, I've never even seen that engine. I had to go look it up to figure out the valve layout, and it's just like small block Chevrolet, the way the lobes are laid out on the cam. It's just a 45-degree angle versus another different bank angle, which makes it much simpler because we got 45 plates. We didn't have to make an index plate for it. So, all right. Anyway, thank you so much. If you need anything, check out the website, powellmachining.com. We noticed everybody's been liking and subscribing and commenting on the videos. And again, I apologize that we haven't been able to make any lately, but I'm trying to late in the evenings before I go home to try to knock one out here and there, stuff that's interesting. I don't want to just put out junk just for the sake of putting out videos. If I put out a video, I want it to be something that either means something to me or it's going to be something educational for you and to me, possibly. So, just keep me on track. If we get off track, let me know what you want to see, what you like, what you don't like, and we'll try to keep it going down that road. Thanks so much. Y'all have a good weekend. See you next time.